Alrighty, hello everyone and welcome to the MediaCentral Stream Enabling IP Contribution for Avid Production Environments webinar. I want to welcome you all and thank you all for taking the time to join us here today. At the end of this webinar, you should have a solid understanding of what MediaCentral Stream is, what the Avid and Haivision partnership is, the Avid and LiveU partnership and an understanding of what that is, and then the workflows that as a combined offering we are now enabling and what's possible, and then last but not least, the benefits of the offering. Some quick logistics for those of you participating via Zoom. You can go ahead and ask questions using the Q&A button in the Zoom. If you are participating via social media channels this evening, thank you. We also have folks on from Avid who will be answering any questions you may have on those platforms as well. So please go ahead and ask any questions there if you prefer. And once again, thank you all for being part of this today. We really appreciate you taking the time. Here's the agenda for today's webinar. I'll do some introductions for myself and the panelists. We'll then talk about MediaCentral Stream. We'll discuss the Avid and Haivision partnership and the announcement we just made. And then we'll do the same with Avid and LiveU. And then we'll discuss, like I said, the workflows that are now possible, both on-prem and the cloud. And then we'll cover benefits. And then at the end, we will answer some questions. So my name is Ray Thompson, and I am the Senior Director here at Avid for Partner Marketing. And we're very fortunate tonight to have Daniel Bizarski, who is the Vice President of Engineering at LiveU. Daniel, you want to say a quick hello to everybody?
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Daniel, and thanks for participating. I know it's late in the evening, East Coast time, so thank you for doing this. And we also have Marcus Schioler, who is the Vice President of Product Marketing at Haivision. Marcus, you want to say hi to everybody?
Yeah, hi Ray, and hi everybody. Thank you for having us with you in this webinar tonight. We're very excited to be talking to all of our friends, hopefully soon to be customers in the regions around the world and especially in Asia.
Awesome, thanks Marcus. And then we also have Craig Wilson, who will be participating via recorded content this evening. He is a product evangelist at Avid for the media and cloud solutions. And so we'll be hearing from everybody here throughout the course of the webinar. So to cover sort of some of the trends that we're seeing in the market, certainly before the pandemic hit, people were adopting IP as a methodology for delivering live feeds into either on-prem or cloud-based environments. And that trend has only increased during the pandemic, because as workflows became more distributed and people had to work from home, it became paramount that media companies become very creative in how they essentially not only deliver content, but certainly how they acquire and ultimately contribute content, especially live content. So many media companies had to pivot and pivot quickly. And not only did they enable work from home models for folks who were accessing environments that were on-premise environments, many media companies shifted to the cloud and certainly accelerated that shift to the cloud. But in order to produce content, they had to initiate and acquire content and do so using alternative methodologies. And certainly IP was already poised to fill in the gap. And so we saw a significant uptick in that activity. And we've been watching it now for several years. And so what Avid really wanted to do was provide a solution. And from all accounts, basically, IP is enabling folks to basically do contribution from anywhere. The way that the protocols work today and the size that these encoders are available in now, including very small sizes that can attach to pretty much anything, or even be completely software-based and embedded inside of mobile devices and really anything, cameras, encoders, has really changed the way in which people work and certainly acquire content and ultimately deliver content live using standard commodity internet. And they're doing so securely, and that's really what these protocols provide, is that secure connection from anywhere into an on-prem or cloud-based environment. So the data certainly suggests the increase, and we've certainly seen it ourselves. So Avid introduced back in January a service called MediaCentral Stream. MediaCentral Stream is a software-only agnostic toolset that runs on a VM, and it can run on-prem or in the cloud. And essentially, it ingests incoming IP streams, and then on the back end, writes those IP streams into Avid-friendly formats, like XDCAM 50, for example, and then checks that into, say, an Avid production environment. It can also write directly as an AAF file, and users can then take that AAF file and bring that into an Avid production environment. But essentially, it is putting content into the Avid production environment, and downstream, those who are used to using Avid toolsets in production are really not changing anything at all. They're still doing edit while capture workflows. They can certainly access that content through MediaCentral's proper, so MediaCentral Cloud UX, or they can go ahead and publish content and deliver content to multiple platforms, whether they be linear or digital platforms, and they can do so all within the Avid production environment, all leveraging Avid Nexus as the storage platform to do so. What this does is provide a more seamless way to ingest IP streams. It allows media companies to cover more with less, which many of whom are already taking advantage of. And basically, we're knocking down some of the technology hurdles that did exist in the past prior to the existence of MediaCentral Stream in terms of being able to get IP content into Avid environments. So MediaCentral Stream, as I said, is able to take an SRT and RTMP in our initial version, which again was just announced and went GA back in January. So it is now a shipping product. It records a growing file, which users can then edit and edit while capture, either using Media Composer or MediaCentral Stream. It's a software-only service that can run either on-prem or in the cloud. It is accessible via a web interface, which you'll see here in a minute as a demo. And it's basically checking the resulting assets into the Avid production environment directly. In terms of the partnerships, we're going to get into that in a moment, but suffice it to say that we're very excited to not only launch MediaCentral Stream, but to do so with two of the leading partners in the industry in both Haivision and LiveU. So some of the key benefits and what we're solving by bringing this to market is, first and foremost, we're simplifying some of the technology hurdles that existed, as I mentioned. We're making it much easier to deploy. This is a very simple solution to configure, set up, and use. And then we're enabling workflows that really up until now weren't possible. So Avid up until now wasn't able to take in live IP streams directly into Avid production environments, and now we can. So this opens up a variety of different workflows, right, for news, sports, remote live production, all of which can happen either on-prem or in the cloud. It's got a very low hardware footprint. And like I said, downstream, users who are used to working in Avid production environments really don't have to change what they've been doing, because it's really just another source of content coming into the production environment. So we've really simplified and streamlined the entire process. So what we found so far in terms of feedback has been that people are very excited about what this means, both for net new workflows as well as efficiency, as media companies are now reliant on IP devices to basically initiate news and sports and live entertainment coverage from pretty much anywhere. They can now do so with Avid production environments, receiving those streams, and then enabling all different types of production to happen, and ultimately deliver content across linear and digital platforms. So let's take a look at a quick overview of what that looks like.
Streams, camera cards, satellite, studio, bonded cellular, edge devices, the ever-increasing array of incoming source options challenge news stations of every size. A critical challenge has been a fast and seamless way to get streaming formats quickly into the hands of users, particularly if a customer wants to work in the cloud. Software-based and deployed on-premises or in the cloud, MediaCentral Stream handles the most common streaming formats of SRT and RTMP to get media securely to your team to turn around stories faster than ever to any platform. There's also integration with the widely used bonded cellular platform LiveU. Lowering your overall cost and running on-premises or in the Azure cloud, MediaCentral Stream lets you scale. It's a simple, reliable and secure way to capitalize on the latest media ingest workflows. Streams.
So one of the key things, like I said, about launching MediaCentral Stream and enabling these workflows was having a strong ecosystem to go to market with. So Avid has been working with Haivision now for some time to really initiate not just a partnership on the technology side, but also a business partnership. So with that, I want to welcome Marcus. Marcus, thank you again for being part of this tonight. You just kind of want to run through both SRT and Haivision and just talk about the Avid and Haivision partnership and how we kind of developed that over the last couple of years.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Ray. And thank you, everybody, for being here tonight, or in the morning, your time, I suppose. This has been something that has been in the works for quite a number of years, actually, at this point. Haivision, as the original developer of the SRT protocol, essentially took this protocol and made it available as an open source initiative back in 2017. And in the process, we started working with partners to develop workflows. And at the very beginning, Avid were one of the companies that jumped on board quickly. So we've actually been working on getting to this point now for quite a while, and we're happy that it's finally here. What this means is that Haivision, the company Haivision, as a provider of global mission critical real-time streaming and networking solutions, are able to work with Avid to sell IP contribution encoders, the Makito X4 family of encoders, to enable workflows for streaming live IP content into broadcast workflows, and especially into editorial workflows. It's something that has been it's been coming for a while, and we're pleased that with the introduction of MediaCentral Stream back in late January, I guess, officially, we're finally able to start talking about this. And so the nature of the agreement between Haivision and Avid is that Avid will be reselling some of Haivision's products, including the Makito X4 encoder, for sending those streams into Avid editorial workflows. The Makito X4 decoder, which, although is not necessarily part of an Avid editorial workflow, it can be an important component of a workflow where you may want to take those IP streams that are being ingested into MediaCentral Stream, but also take them and use them as part of another live workflow inside of your broadcast facility. So the decoder is part of the option as well. And then we've also included a product called the Haivision SRT Gateway, which is it's a workflow component that can create some pretty interesting other workflows in addition to IP contribution. Commonly, it's used for aggregating streams. So if you have a lot of different events that are going out in the field and you're sending them back into the facility, the SRT Gateway can be used for aggregating those feeds and simplifying the management of all of those. It also enables a couple of other really interesting features, including remote collaboration and monitoring. So for instance, if you have producers or directors who are not at the broadcast facility, which certainly has been the case during the past year with the pandemic, where often people have been working, say, from home or from offices that are not located on premise where the broadcast equipment is located, they still want to see what's going on. And with the addition of the SRT Gateway, they're able to very simply get a replicated stream, an SRT stream, that will then not only go into the Avid workflow, but also go to other people who can watch it on a mobile device, for instance. Very simply, Haivision has an app called Play Pro, which runs on a phone. You can simply pull up your SRT stream and see what's being streamed in from the field into editorial. So that's something that's very useful for producers, directors, and other technical staff. And you can also use the SRT Gateway to take the streams and send them back. So the people in the field who are actually contributing feeds can actually see what's going on in the editorial environments, and that can be very helpful for adjusting the the composition of the cameras or whatever it is, so that ultimately the content that you're sending back into the editorial workflows looks as good as it possibly can. So I think these are all now available for Avid to sell, and if there's interest, then obviously you should be working with your Avid salespeople. But I think the key thing for us with this very exciting partnership is how we're working with Avid to make these products part of a certified and tested end-to-end solution. And Haivision are here to work with you guys alongside of Avid to make sure that the implementations are successful, and that ultimately this is, we hope, something that will be the beginning of a very beautiful friendship that develops over the years to come. So I think that's a quick introduction, and I'll pass it back to you, Ray.
Thanks, Marcus. And I think that's a great point. You know, it's sort of the culmination of the Internet of Things in a way, right? Because now you're able to contribute content from anywhere, pretty much from any device, right? And do so reliably using the SRT protocol, and do so into Avid production environments. And the fact that you can use Makitos, which further augments the overall offering, including the management of things like latency, which is always critical when you're doing any type of live contribution over commodity internet. You know, that definitely takes the solution to another level. And so as a high level overview here, right, what you can see left to right is the Makito X4, which is where you're initiating the SRT stream. You're sending that over commodity internet. MediaCentral stream then ingests the incoming SRT feed and then writes it into an Avid friendly format, writes it onto Nexus, where then Media Composer and MediaCentral users can then access that content for edit while capture workflows, including growing files, and then ultimately publish and deliver content across linear and digital platforms. And this can happen, again, on-prem or in the cloud. We anticipate quite a few folks are still heavily on-prem and migrating towards a hybrid environment, but either way, you can deploy it in one, the other, or both, for that matter. So thanks, Marcus. And we'll hear from Marcus again here in a moment. Our other key partner here at launch is LiveU. So I want to welcome Daniel back on. Daniel, welcome.
Thanks, Ray.
So Daniel, you want to just talk through LiveU, who LiveU is, if folks aren't already familiar, and sort of the different offerings you guys have and the compatibility now between.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us here. So I hope everybody here is pretty familiar with LiveU. If you're not, our kind of core competency is IP bonding. We make video encoders and video contribution systems, which are tightly coupled to IP bonding systems and bond multiple connections together, very often cellular connections, hence the term cellular bonding. So probably know us for the famous backpack form factor, but we also make camera mount or belt mount form factors, in vehicle, 1U rack mount, on the shelf encoders, all of which are capable of bonding, whether you're using LTE connections, whether you're bonding IP satellite, whether you're bonding multiple LAN connections together for IP contribution. That lets you contribute video from anywhere in the world that you can get a signal, even on the move, even in motion, even far away from other infrastructure. And now what we're announcing today, and we're very excited about, is that in addition to taking that video, flowing it into your traditional workflow or into your cloud-based workflow, you can also flow it through SRT into your Avid-based workflow. First time we're offering SRT out from our received software and offering it in a few new configurations where you can basically use it in a kind of hybrid cloud configuration. Either we'll host it for you, or if you're hosting this software in your own cloud, host it there, or if you want to contribute SRT feeds from your physical LiveU receive servers into the Avid workflow, all three situations will work, and you'll be able to get that video in the Avid workflow as well as still use it as part of your live workflow, of course.
That's amazing. So basically, left to right, you're using any LiveU device, basically over bonded cellular, delivering live feeds into the LiveU vConnect connector, which is then sending SRT to MediaCentral stream. And then downstream, it's very similar to the other workflow in the sense that writing to Nexus and folks using Media Composer or MediaCentral can do edit while capture workflows, quickly turn around content across linear and digital platforms. And so again, this is really affording media companies the ability to cover more with less, while at the same time having a much more seamless integration that knocks down some of the technical hurdles that in the past did exist if you did want to bring in content to Avid production environments coming in over a LiveU feed. So thank you, Daniel. This is we're very excited about this partnership, and thank you again for being part of this evening, and we'll be talking to you again here in a moment. So thanks, Daniel. The other key thing that you may or may not be familiar with, of course, is Avid and Microsoft. We have a partnership, one that started many years ago. Key to the Avid partnership initially from a technology perspective was integrating the Nexus file system into the Azure blob storage stack. And essentially that is really foundation for everything that has come after. So all the as a service offerings and or custom cloud deployments that have been done have really benefited from the integration that is completely unique to what Avid and Microsoft have done together, right? So that's sort of where everything else emanates from. So what that means is that when you bring content into, say, a cloud environment, specifically Microsoft Azure, you're bringing in either LiveU LRT feeds or Haivision SRT streams, and you're basically bringing those into MediaCentral stream. And again, it's writing to the Avid Nexus file system sitting on Azure Blob Storage. Then users who are remote accessing the environment from anywhere using either MediaCentral or Media Composer are able to edit either at home or really from anywhere they have a reliable internet connection, and can then do their editing and collaborate as a team across geographies and do so in a cloud-based environment, and ultimately deliver content across linear and digital platforms. And so from a cloud perspective, this is really a big deal because up until now, Avid has really only been able to offer file-based workflows, which are heavily, post-oriented workflows. And those post workflows could be post and broadcast, right? But they could also be traditional post. And so that's where a lot of the emphasis has been initially. But with this addition of the MediaCentral Stream service, we can now do live workflows in the cloud. So this opens us up to not only a broader array of workflows that are now possible on-prem and in the cloud, of course, but it also allows us to take on projects that maybe in the past we would not have been thought of for because of the fact that we didn't have this component available. That includes things like maybe esports, who traditionally do all IP-based workflows, or maybe large events where they're doing a traditional broadcast, but they're also in parallel covering other events that would require IP as the main methodology for doing contribution into a production environment. And so we're able to do smaller events, large events, and everything in between. Anything leveraging IP nowadays is now possible in terms of working with Avid. And if you kind of have been paying attention over the last year to all the different things that MediaCentral and the MediaCentral team has been rolling out, this really sort of further augments the solution, which is a very open platform. So we've introduced things like a mobile app for collaboration across mobile platforms. We've introduced the publishing tool, MediaCentral Publish, to publish across social media platforms and further augment that content before you publish it by changing the aspect ratio, adding closed captioning, even doing ad insertion, as well as compatibility with other, ENPS systems, Octopus, other newsroom systems that are out there, right? So open platform, and then basically arming teams with the different tool sets to sort of cover the various different workflows they need to employ in order to maintain business continuity during the pandemic, while at the same time as companies pivot and change to as a service models and accelerate their move to the cloud. That is now possible, and it's possible with live content and live production as well. So when you kind of look at really all of what we're bringing to market between the partners, between Haivision, LiveU, Avid, and Microsoft, we're enabling a whole new set of workflows that weren't possible until MediaCentral Stream was brought to market, and the partnerships that have been made at launch between Avid and LiveU and Avid and Haivision. And then we're enabling both on-prem and cloud-based production to happen using these IP streams. And we're not affecting or changing the downstream workflow for folks used to working in Avid production environments. It's still the same. We're capitalizing on the good work that was done to integrate Nexus into Azure. And all of this is accessible using the tools folks know and love in both MediaCentral and Media Composer. And of course, we're taking advantage of all of the goodness in terms of security, services, and scalability, and elasticity, right, that is afforded by the Microsoft Azure Cloud as a Service offering. So let's see MediaCentral Stream in action.
So hi everybody, my name is Craig Wilson. I am the product evangelist for Media and Cloud at Avid. And what I'm going to take you through, as Ray said, is really just a short demo of what MediaCentral Stream is and how it works in action. As you can see on my screen here, it's running through a web browser. So I'm running this through just through Google Chrome on my laptop. I'm just going to make this full screen for me now, so I've got a bit more screen real estate. And what you can see with MediaCentral Stream is that I have 4 channels that I can use for doing recordings. I have one channel that has a stream coming in at the moment. If I hover my mouse over it, you'll see at the right-hand side now, it gives you some information about it. It tells you the bandwidth, for example, number of audio channels, the frames per second of the stream that's coming in, and the size, for example. And MediaCentral Stream, from a user perspective, is intended to be pretty simple and straightforward to use. And I think that's one of the real beauties about it, is that it's taking a lot of the complexity that currently exists for workflows where we're taking streams into a production environment. It really takes that away. So what we're going to focus on is this tab here called the remote console. So this is the user end for what a user would use to actually bring streams into the system itself. So here at the right-hand side, from this burger menu, you see I have access to ingest templates, routing or writing templates, and also some crash record setting. The first thing we'll look at is the routing or routing templates editor. So in the routing templates, this is where I can go in and I can define templates that I want to use to do particular recordings. And we'll come back to these in a second. But for example, I can put in what would be the stream address. There's obviously some information that you need to have around where the stream is originating from, what the host URL for that would be, for example, any passphrase you may be using, particular encoding, and you want to put a passphrase against this for additional security. You can also define which port. This would be the port that's sending you and forwarding the stream, and also then the protocol. So of course, as Ray has mentioned previously, we're supporting here both SRT and RTMP files, as they are coming into the actual system itself. So we'll come back to this in a second, because I will actually set up a route and do a stream with that. We also then have ingest templates, and ingest templates are where you can define, for example, the codec that you want to ingest, the raster size, the workspace on your Nexus that you want to write the media to, whether you want to have, a default naming convention. For example, here, you could have the input channel, the date, the time as a default if you don't type a name in. And because here I'm working with my MediaCentral production system, I can check in the media, I can generate a thumbnail, and I can also enable this as a growing file, because that's really one of the key workflows, of course, because it's really all about getting media from the field very quickly into the hands of your production team. And I think that applies across news, sports, live production. It really is about just taking the stress out of that and getting the media into your production environment for people to then, of course, then go off and use. And then the final thing we also have is we have some crash record settings. So this is where I can actually select, and I can do this on an individual channel basis, which of those ingest templates I want to use. So I'll show you in a second. I can do different types of recording into a crash recording, or I can actually set up a recording and add some more information in. So the first thing I really want to show, though, is about doing a very quick recording and then seeing that come into the MediaCentral system itself. So the first thing I could do, as I mentioned, is I could just do a crash record. So if I just do a crash record, all I need to do is press on this button here, and what you'll see is that the channel goes into record, and I then get some on-screen display settings to show me that this channel is in record. Now, these on-screen display settings are configurable on each of the channel. You see here we have OSD settings. So say, for example, here I wanted to enable house timecode. I can just enable that and save it, and then there's the house timecode appears. So that's a feed that's now coming into the system. Here I'm just looking at a preview of it. But now if I switch across and go into my MediaCentral Cloud UX client, this is, for those of you who don't know, MediaCentral Cloud UX is a browser-based tool from Avid that works in our production environment. So using this, I can, of course, access and edit video, as well as do a whole host of other things. And we also have the MediaCentral Cloud UX panel inside Media Composer. So what I'm showing you here in terms of the workflow is something that could easily be done inside Composer as well. So here, this is the folder that I has predefined as part of that ingest template for the media to come in. And so I can now see, if I make this a little bit bigger, that I have this clip coming into the system. It has this icon here, which shows me that this is a growing file. And then if I double click on the clip here, it's going to load in the video player, and that is now going to allow me to go off and to edit it. Now, as I mentioned, this workflow is also enabled inside Media Composer, and this is where I think one of the key benefits of the MediaCentral Stream workflow comes in, is that the downstream workflow for your production team doesn't change. So this is exactly the same as if you were accessing and using a file that was coming in through, maybe some more traditional, SDI, ingest routes directly into the system itself, if you're recording out from the studio or something like that. So from a user perspective, if they're working in MediaCentral, they're working in Media Composer, they really, really don't care. But, there's the feed that's coming in. I can see it's a growing feed, but I can now play back and I can access it. Now, I realize, through Zoom, it may look choppy and things like that, just because we're using, Zoom to do that. But it gives me direct access to the feed. And of course, I can then come in and I can, mark in and out, and I can begin to edit, just drag and drop that clip into the timeline. And I could carry on and work with that. And then, of course, what I can do is then take that content and then distribute it. So I could publish it to the studio. I could publish it to social media using MediaCentral Publisher, which is part of MediaCentral Cloud UX. I could publish it to our web CMS system and do all of these kind of things. So as I say, that downstream workflow really, really doesn't change. Now I'm going to switch back just now to MediaCentral Stream again, because I want to show you, setting up a route as well. So you can see there that recording has just finished. But this time what I want to do is I want to show you how simple it is to just, create and access a feed that's coming in using those templates that we looked at earlier on. So MediaCentral Stream has 4 channels. On each of the channels, you can select what you want to have. So here I'm going to create a routing. Here are the templates that have already been created. So I'm just going to choose this Haivision Play Pro one and then select to route. And there you can see almost immediately the feed begins to stream into the system. And actually what you're looking at here is my iPhone. So, if I just bring it up to the camera, you might be able to see that, I have an iPhone here. And I'm using the Haivision Play Pro app to stream out. And I think that just gives an indication of, the number of different devices that you could have that then give you this possibility. One other thing to mention about the app is that I could also access other streams that are coming in as well. So if you imagine I'm a reporter or producer out in the field and I want to see a live stream that's coming in, I would also be able to access that using the app as well. But exactly the same as we did before, this time I'm going to go in, I'm going to create a recording using one of the templates. I'm going to change the file name. So this is Craig Phone Ingest. And this time, just go ahead and hit record. And again, in a few seconds, you'll see it's going to go into record. So there it goes into record. If I now switch back across to my MediaCentral client here, and I just refresh the view I've got of the folder, there is the feed that's now coming in. So, it's really, really quick between establishing the stream, sticking the stream into record, and now I'm able to come in and work with it as if it was any other feed that's coming into the system. So I think for news production, live production, sports production, there's lots and lots of options. And I think the other thing that's worthwhile mentioning is that everything I've shown you is actually using systems that are deployed in the cloud. So it is about that potential journey to the cloud that a lot of customers are looking for at the moment, and taking workflows from on-premises into the cloud as well. And MediaCentral Stream, I think, is an important component part. So Ray, with that, I will stop sharing and I will hand it back to you. So
thank you, Craig. So now you've seen MediaCentral Stream in action, and you saw Craig able to initiate a stream on a mobile device. We were also taking in streams from Makitos and from LiveU units. And he was basically showing you how easy it is to not only configure those devices inside of MediaCentral Stream, but to also configure the media type and the various different options in terms of creating a thumbnail, checking into the production environment, and doing a growing file so you could do those edit while capture workflows. So this is a very easy solution to implement into an existing environment. It's also very easy to set up in the cloud. In fact, all the demos that we've been doing since really we first rolled the product out have always been done running in the cloud. And so it is definitely cloud ready. And it's a scalable, flexible offering, and it's secure, right? Both the LRT and SRT protocols have security built into both. And then of course, if you're running it in the cloud, there's not only the Microsoft security baked already inherently into Azure, but then there's all the security baked into Avid applications that sit on top. And then the same thing holds true for anything that you may be doing on-prem. So with that, I'm going to invite both Daniel and Marcus back on, and I'm going to encourage folks to go ahead and ask questions in the Q&A section, and we'll go ahead and answer any of those questions that you have. And while you are considering any questions you may have, I'm going to go ahead and start with my own. So, Marcus and Daniel, certainly before the pandemic happened, IP technology and IP methodologies were already becoming dominant in the marketplace for the reasons that A, you could cover more with less, and B, from an economic perspective, it was very appealing to media companies because it was obviously much lower cost versus say satellite or fiber, but it was also streamlining workflows from the standpoint of the number of people you would actually have to deploy to even do a live event, right? That went down significantly as well. Can you guys each talk about what you've seen both pre and then post pandemic in terms of the spike in usage of IP? And Marcus, why don't you go ahead first?
Sure, thanks, Ray. Definitely Haivision, we've been providing solutions for IP contribution for many years, and the SRT protocol has been an important part of enabling that because SRT, I don't know if we even mentioned it, but it stands for Secure Reliable Transport, and it's all about sending live video over any network, and especially the public internet, which is great, but unfortunately not always the highest quality in terms of the performance of the network. So SRT was designed to overcome those challenges and enabled IP contribution workflows for all sorts of customers. And an example that comes to mind from before the pandemic was one of our big customers, Riot Games, who I'm sure a lot of people have heard about. They produce a League of Legends esports tournament that culminates in the annual big League of Legends World Championships. And if you think back to a couple of years ago, the event itself was taking place in Korea. But because of the scope of the event, it wasn't really possible for them to produce it on site as they might have in a regular sporting event. So they had tried to figure out if there was an opportunity for them to transport all of the live video synchronized, because it was multiple cameras, back to their production facility in Los Angeles, where they then did the live production and were able to pass it on to all their various channels and reach ultimately 99 million people who are watching this huge esports event. And essentially using Makitos, they were streaming synchronized frames up, I think something like 24 cameras or something like that simultaneously from Korea back to Los Angeles, with a low enough latency that they were able to do all of this live with different people in different locations who were still able to understand what was going on and communicate with each other. So, you know, for them, the advantages were critical, because there wasn't really a way for them to do it otherwise if they hadn't kept their production facility centralized back in Los Angeles. They just weren't going to be able to scale and cover all the locations that they needed to. So they implemented this workflow, and it was very, very successful. And you know, we continue to see much of that type of thing in esports, in news, and other sporting events. It's used that was used before, and certainly now. I think what we saw as soon as the pandemic hit was that there was this sudden need to figure out ways of enabling not just remote production, but remote collaboration, and figuring out ways of putting on these events anyway, because live TV, live broadcasts have always been such an important driver for you know, bringing people to watch content. I mean, this is how the broadcasters make a living on these live events. And the you know, a great example that comes to mind from just at the beginning of the pandemic was the NFL football virtual draft, which, you know, it's an event that takes place in the spring every year. And they saw that the pandemic was hitting, and they were wondering whether they were going to be able to accommodate the usual event, which took place on location in Las Vegas with draft picks and team managers and coaches and NFL staff and, you know, all sorts of people that were coming together. And the league had established protocols for safety, health and safety, that meant that people could not do that anymore. And that they actually mandated that every single person that was participating in the draft had to be at home. From coaches to GMs to the prospects. And that posed a real challenge, because the prospects were at home on their home internets, and they were using their mother's phone, or, you know, they were tethering to their phone bandwidth or whatever they were doing in order to get content back into the production facility, which was taking place at the NFL facility. But in order for them to do that, they decided that they were going to leverage the SRT protocol and Haivision SRT gateways to aggregate all these streams. So they were basically capturing everything all the time, because they had no idea which draft pick would get picked. And so essentially what was happening was it was kind of a panic, and everybody was jumping onto virtual workflows, and people were using Zoom and Teams, and the internet was going crazy, and you know, people's network performance was terrible. And yet throughout all of this, the SRT protocol, which was designed to overcome problems related to poor internet performance, made it so that they never lost a frame. That they didn't need all of it all the time, but whenever they needed to switch to somebody, they had it, and they were able to go live with those people. So I think it's a great example of how SRT and internet have you know, really come together. And with COVID, you know, it was a very important technology that actually enabled us to overcome a lot of challenges related to live broadcast. But we're seeing now, and you know, working with you guys, of course, that there's an amazing opportunity to continue to leverage this technology to drive live IP contribution workflows into editorials. So yeah, it certainly was an interesting time, and I think people figured out very, very quickly, based on necessity, how to get those feeds into their workflows, and we're just seeing more and more and more of it going on.
Yeah, and do so effectively, right? I mean, that's the other thing too. I think lessons learned, right? Daniel, I imagine you and LiveU have seen, you know, a lot of the similar types of behaviors, right? Spikes in usage.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just as you said, we saw this trend. You know, of course, we, as Marcus was saying with Haivision, I think LiveU as well, you know, been very involved in IP contribution from the field for a decade before this, and saw this growing trend in not just IP contribution for the first mile, but you know, keeping things IP and cloud as for the rest of the workflow, and the advantages that you kind of outlined at the beginning. But once you had your news and not just your traffic report coming from the field, but your news anchor at home in their basement and all of your guests that you were bringing in at home from their den or wherever they were able to put up a camera. You really had some challenges around IP contribution and IP contribution from very unreliable bandwidth, even if that unreliable bandwidth wasn't only cellular, it was just a home, poor cable modem that was also being used by the kids playing Xbox upstairs sort of situation. So we definitely saw a big explosion in the use of IP, and we saw a big explosion in the interest in how do I keep all of this in the cloud, because if I can't be promised access to my facility, or if I have to take into account the risk that we're going to be locked out of our facility, I want to make sure that I've got as much of this workflow in the cloud as I can. So really an acceleration of an interesting trend that was already going on, but a very large acceleration in that trend.
Yeah, it's amazing. Media companies had to pivot quickly, and certainly IP was one of the ways in which they pivoted, right, to enable these workflows. We have a question from the audience here. It says, in this type of cloud workflow, the media acquired by the editor would be compressed, by which, when delivering the edited content, are we bound by this quality? So I guess the answer to that is yes, it is a compressed file that ultimately gets received. But then we're transcoding that to, say, an XDCAM 50, for example, file. There are other file types, by the way, that MediaCentral Stream can basically transcode to, and it does so on the fly. So you can do those edit while capture workflows. So while, yes, you are getting a compressed file, which is just sort of inherent in many ways to how things get delivered, yeah, you're still dealing with a very high quality, right? So you can still send pretty high bitrate content over these protocols. So am I missing anything there, guys? Marcus or Daniel on that one?
I think that's absolutely true. One of the important things to keep in mind, for instance, with a Makito encoder is, if you're working with H.264 in an Avid workflow, you can configure the bitrate to get the best possible quality that you can, given what your network conditions are. If you have a good solid network performance of a fat pipe, then you can dial up a higher bit rate, and you can use the SRT protocol to overcome any glitches that might happen to make sure that you're still getting high quality video in. But equally, and is often the case when it comes to unpredictable events that are happening, breaking news and things like that, the reliability of the network isn't something that you necessarily have much time to take into consideration. You just have to deal with whatever you're dealt with, and sometimes that means that you'll work with a lower bitrate stream to make sure that you're getting good looking quality video. And certainly Haivision has been involved from our work with other types of organizations in defense, for instance, in providing high quality streams at low bit rates, and making sure that those get to where you need them live using the SRT protocol. So it's very flexible in terms of how you handle this type of situation. But at the end of the day, they get written in. I guess I hate to use the expression garbage in, garbage out, because I don't want to use that for ourselves. But certainly, if you're using a low quality stream because of your network performance and the internet, it's not suddenly going to look great. But when it comes to breaking news, it's fundamentally important to get the content to air. And if you have a fat pipe, then you can have a great looking video stream that's going in and getting captured into Avid. So it's all about taking advantage of the network and the circumstances that you're dealing with. Yeah,
and the efficiencies and the ability to cover more. How about you, Daniel? Anything you'd add to that?
Just to add on to both what you and Marcus said, if anybody here is not familiar with kind of the quality of the new codecs and protocols are capable of, like if you're sending 20 megabits or 30 megabits per second from the field of HEVC, if you're not real familiar with that quality yet, then take a look. I think don't let yourself get stuck in kind of older notions of, well, I'm going to have to send a 4 megabits H.264 stream as a way to get this out of the field, and think that that's the quality you're going to see. Certainly bonded systems, newer systems, newer encoders from both Haivision and LiveU are capable of much higher bit rates and HEVC codec and resiliency on the stream, and you're going to be, I think, pretty impressed with the quality you're going to get.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, I think the chances are you've probably seen LiveU and Haivision SRT streams already, either in a live broadcast or as some piece of produced content, I bet you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. I mean, the even 6 megabits looks pretty awesome these days, in terms of content, and that is at the lower end of the spectrum in terms of what you're able to deliver using these protocols. So I agree. I think that's a great point, Daniel. Don't get hung up on some of the old school notions of bit rate and resolution and quality, because it's the game has definitely changed, and compression works very differently nowadays with these newer protocols. So, but thank you for that question. That's a good one. Another sort of related question that I think is important for people to understand is latency, right? And certainly setting a latency budget in live event scenarios is often a critical component, depending on what that event is. So I was curious, Marcus, is there anything you can touch on as it relates to latency and in Haivision and SRT and sort of some of the controls that you have when setting budgets?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about latency, basically the difference between when you see something, when it's actually happening, and when you see it wherever you ultimately want it to be. When we talk about live in sort of contribution workflows, we're talking about very low latency. We're talking about sub 1 second latencies. And in the case of Makito encoders, it can be a couple hundred milliseconds. And really what contributes to overall latency is a number of factors. The encoders certainly contribute something, and Makitos are very, very low latency in that regard. The distance that you have to transport the video has a certain latency associated with it. And then the SRT protocol itself can be configured in such a way to add a little bit extra latency. And the purpose of that little extra bit of latency is actually to allow for the packets to arrive and make sure they are, everything is there and that you're getting a high quality image. And essentially how SRT is working is it is receiving the packets as fast as it can get them. And if it gets them, great. If it doesn't get them because of a network problem, then it sends a non-acknowledgement, essentially saying, please send me the packet again. So the packet gets resent. And depending on the distance and depending on the nature of your network, if the network is really, really bad for whatever reason, you may have to send the packets a couple of times before they arrive. And if you're going greater distances, that may be a 50 milliseconds, 75 milliseconds, 100 milliseconds of latency. So that can add up, and you configure the SRT protocol buffer in such a way that it all gets there and it comes out of the, into the Avid MediaCentral stream looking good. So you can configure SRT to something like an 8-second buffer. That's what you use if you expect terrible networks all the time. And in fact, that's what the NFL was basically using that, because they just wanted to have good quality video. They didn't necessarily care that much about them, that, as long as they had the frames and they were going to be able to use them. And switch to people when they need them. Most of the time, people configure SRT at, with maybe a 200 millisecond buffer or something like that, additionally above what the encoder contributes and what the network transport actually takes. So getting under half a second is usually very, very doable, which for live news, that's basically real time. Yeah.
Daniel, I imagine the same thing, right? LiveU must have excellent latency budget settings that you can create.
Yeah, it's kind of the one control we give to end users to try to keep the system simple in terms of choosing exactly what Marcus was outlining. Am I in a situation where I need low latency, or is this, the end viewer is never going to realize this was delayed a second because they're just going to see it, coming out of their TV screen, and I can afford that larger budget for the resiliency. And then if I do need low latency, what are my expectations in terms of the network that I'm on, or what kind of challenge I'm facing? So you adjust latency, measured as glass to glass latency in the LiveU system to what you think you can tolerate. And then we do all of the work under the hood to figure out, okay, which resiliency techniques can we use, and how much of the stream will have to be recovered in bad situations, and send over the bonded connections, or recovered from things like forward error correction. So we take any of that complex thinking out of the end user's hands, and hopefully make it as simple as, hey, I can tolerate 500 milliseconds, 600 milliseconds of latency. Let me dial that in, and then we'll deliver the best quality we can in that latency budget. Very
cool. So I see a question from Joe. So Joe, MediaCentral today supports H.264. So we're taking in H.264 today in V1, and then we're transcoding that to an XDCAM 50 file or an AAF file. You have options in MediaCentral Stream to create a couple different things. We're going to be adding both broader support for other basically codecs in V2, which is coming soon, and the ability to transcode to more bit rates and more codecs as well for what you bring inside of the production environment for Avid. So and that should be coming in the March, April timeframe. So good question, Joe. Daniel, when you think about like technology inflection points, right, of which there have been many, right, and I feel like technology is moving, especially so quickly now that people have really accelerated, their move both to as a service and cloud. Whereas, not long ago, cloud was, got a lot of headlines, but certainly it was still kind of a lot of POC type, stuff happening in the cloud. But when you look at something like 5G, I got to imagine for LiveU, right? That's going to be a pretty big, inflection point for you from a technology perspective. Is that true?
It is true. It's going to enable a lot of things. There's a lot of focus, I think, especially in the consumer world, on, of course, up and down bandwidth, uplink and downlink bandwidth. And that's going to be great because the more you do in the cloud and the more you do in a remote style, like a remote production, the more data you need, not just for audio and video, but for everything else, right? Like comms and return feed to the field and control of your robotic cameras in the field, things like that. So we find with the units, we're constantly adding more and more interconnects and more IO to help you do that remote production in the field. And that, while it may not take as much bandwidth as a 10-bit HDR 4K video, it certainly still takes bandwidth, and having 5G there to provide it is really nice. But the part that I'm even a little bit more excited about when it comes to 5G is deterministic and low latency. So one of the real challenges with LTE networks is the latency is ever changing. If you kind of monitor it millisecond by millisecond over the course of a stream, you find that the latency just goes in this up and down change that wired networks just don't behave the same way, except under kind of extreme circumstances. So it's not deterministic, and it can often be quite high. Like on LTE, it's not uncommon to see 250 milliseconds latency or even 500 milliseconds of latency just for packets to arrive. And so then you're kind of really blowing out the glass to glass budget we were just talking about. So seeing deterministic latency and seeing much lower latency in 5G, those are really tangible benefits that we can take advantage of even at lower bit rates or in many different circumstances for different protocols, whether it's the audio and video or whether it is comms or just a feedback loop, things like that. So that's a very exciting part of 5G for us.
Very cool. And then Marcus, for SRT as a protocol, right? One of the things in terms of the openness of the protocol is the fact that all these companies have jumped on board, and there have been some big announcements there, right, recently in terms of some of the bigger names that have jumped into it. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, let me set it up a little bit with the background on the SRT Alliance, since the SRT Alliance is the name of the group that companies are joining to effectively promote the adoption of SRT and move it towards a de facto industry standard. So Haivision originally developed SRT around 2012, and in 2017 we decided to take it open source, and we made that announcement at NAB in 2017. And along with the open source announcement, we also announced the new formation of the organization called the SRT Alliance. And essentially what we were doing was inviting organizations to join, to essentially basically say, we believe that internet transport is a problem that we need to solve for the world, and technology like SRT can be a pretty fundamental component. So, back at the beginning, there were a lot of companies that jumped on very quickly, including Avid and Microsoft and many others who were working with us to take the SRT protocol and build it into their products, because the SRT Alliance has all sorts of different types of companies, but it's primarily technology companies that are taking the protocol and the open source SRT and integrating it into theirs. Recently, I guess it was maybe in December, we passed the 450 company milestone. So 450 companies had joined the Alliance, and it continues to roll. There are constantly new companies that are joining. Very recently, back at the end of January, we were excited to be able to announce that Sony had joined the SRT Alliance, and that certainly was a very big addition. We were excited about them because they were talking about how they were going to take the SRT protocol and integrate it into their IP cameras to do live IP contribution directly from camera into SRT workflows. And I don't know for sure that it's working with MediaCentral Stream, but I hope that it would one day.
Yeah.
And that's very much the intent of the SRT Alliance, that all these vendors can come together. And actually, back in I think it was early December, we had what we call an SRT Plug Fest, where a lot of the member companies got together to work on testing out the integrations between their products to ensure that it was everything was working seamlessly, and a lot of partners were there testing it out. So I mean, it's really about taking this protocol that has enabled some pretty amazing new workflows at a time when they were very much needed. Certainly, I mean, before the pandemic they were needed, but even more so, during and continuing after. And so we're delighted that we've had the success that we've had working with all sorts of exciting partners. And if people want to know more about it, they can go to the srtalliance.org website, and there's lots of information. There's constantly new webinars with partners who are talking about their integrations, and you'll find out all about the news. And if you actually want to integrate SRT yourself, you can get access to the open source through there and build it into your own workflows.
Awesome. Well, we're just a little bit over time, and I want to thank both Marcus and Daniel for being a part of the webinar today. Again, it's late East Coast time, so I really appreciate you guys taking time out of your evening to be in this webinar. It's been a great session. Real quick, I'll answer David and Joe's other questions. So David, any plans for a low latency codec like JPEG XS? I will say not yet, but I will put it on the list. So thank you, great question. And then Joe, 422 10-bit, yes. And so that is definitely in there. So so I will thank you for the questions. And thank you all for participating this evening. This has been recorded, by the way. And so you'll be able to have access to this later. We'll send this out as an email along with answers to all the questions that have been asked during the webinar. And we will basically distribute this once the webinar is over to those of you who couldn't make it, and you can watch this at a later time at your convenience. And once again, thank you all for joining. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Marcus. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. And we really appreciate you taking the time. So thank you.
Thank you very much.